I remember the exact moment he laughed. It wasn't just a laugh. It was the kind that lodges itself deep into your ribs, curdling there like spoiled milk. We were sitting across from each other in my cramped apartment, which doubled as my workspace. My desk was covered in hand-drawn wireframes, crumpled notes, and a flickering second-hand monitor that buzzed more than it glowed. I was explaining the concept of my startup, eyes wide with hope, heart hammering with the kind of optimism only blind faith can afford. He leaned back on the wobbly chair, crossed his arms, and chuckled. Not because he misunderstood. He'd heard me clearly. No, he laughed because he understood it too well and thought it was pathetic. A productivity app for freelancers? He scoffed. Babe, no offense, but no one's gonna use that. You should focus on getting a real job. You're not built for this tech hustle. That moment should have been the first warning sign. Not just about the startup, but about him. Something in his eyes felt too sharp, too condescending, like he needed me to fail so he could feel big. But I swallowed my pride, nodded like I was grateful for his honesty, and kept working. I told myself he was just trying to protect me. He didn't mean harm, just didn't want me wasting my time. I repeated that excuse so often it became a mantra. The next few months passed in a blur of silent tension. He'd come over, scroll through his phone while I coded late into the night, and occasionally drop snide remarks masked as jokes. You're still on that thing? How much did that make you this week? 3 cents. Maybe you should build an app to help people know when to quit. Each jab was small, almost ignorable, but they stacked on top of each other like bricks, slowly building a wall between us. I kept brushing them off, convincing myself I was just being too sensitive. He wasn't wrong, was he? I was broke. I was working 10-hour days for something that hadn't turned a profit. But still, the way he said it, it wasn't concern. It was amusement. One evening, I was sharing dinner with him and some of his friends at this fancy rooftop bar he liked to show off. He ordered drinks without asking what I wanted, then proceeded to tell everyone how I was playing entrepreneur. I laughed along, cheeks burning, pretending I was in on the joke. Maybe she'll sell it to Google for $1 billion, he said, clinking his glass. That night, as we walked home, I noticed something strange. We passed by a small co-working space, just a window, some laptops, and 2 young guys arguing over code. My ex paused, looked through the glass for a moment too long, and smirked. Not because it was inspiring, but because he felt superior. That was the first time I realized he enjoyed seeing others try and fail. Especially me. A week later, I launched my MVP. It was buggy, slow, and had fewer users than a forgotten Tumblr page. But it worked. People signed up. A few even emailed me feedback. I was ecstatic. I rushed to tell him, thinking maybe, just maybe, this would be the moment he looked at me differently. That he'd say, "Wow, you really did it." Instead, he barely looked up from his phone. "Cool. You should still think about grad school, though. This won't last." That was the last straw. I didn't say anything out loud, but something shifted inside me that day. I stopped showing him updates. Stopped inviting him over while I worked. And eventually, I stopped answering his calls. He didn't fight it. I think deep down, he never really thought I was going anywhere. He probably assumed I'd come crawling back when the servers crashed or when rent came due and the app wasn't paying the bills. But I didn't. I moved out of that apartment and into a shared workspace with 3 other developers who actually believed in building things. I applied for a grant. I joined every free founder group I could find. I taught myself marketing at 2 a.m. on YouTube and learned how to pitch investors through free LinkedIn webinars. And still, he never checked in. It was almost a year later, after I'd raised a pre-seed round and hired my first 2 interns, that I saw him again. I was interviewing candidates for our operations role. My assistant had scheduled back-to-back interviews, and I was already running on fumes when the next name popped up on the screen, Derek Whitmore. My stomach tightened. Could it be? It was a common enough name, but still. The door opened, and there he was. My ex-Derek, wearing a suit slightly too tight, hair more stressed than styled. He didn't recognize me at first, not until he sat down across from me and saw my name printed on the welcome folder. His smile froze. I could see the gears turning in his head, trying to match the version of me he remembered with the woman in front of him. I watched as his eyes darted to the company logo behind me, the same name I told him about in my old apartment, the one he had laughed at. He opened his mouth to say something, but I stopped him with a simple nod and the first interview question on my clipboard. Tell me about a time you underestimated someone and what you learned from it. And just like that, the power shifted. He hesitated just for a moment. A flicker of discomfort passed over his face, like he'd swallowed a bitter pill. But Derek was always quick on his feet, always ready, with a charm offensive. He sat a little straighter, forced a chuckle, and said, "Well, I guess this is a very appropriate question." He tried to play it off, but I could see it. His confidence had cracked. For once, he wasn't holding the cards. He launched into a story, something about underestimating a coworker during a group project in his last role. It was a generic answer, polished, but forgettable. I didn't need to hear it. I was more interested in watching him squirm. And he did. Not in big ways, just the small, telling ones. He fidgeted with his tie, cleared his throat too often. His eyes kept drifting to my nameplate, as if trying to reconcile the image of his ex who played entrepreneur with the woman now sitting on the other side of the table. But I played it cool, professional, detached. "Thank you for your response," I said, making a note on my clipboard. "Tell me, how do you respond to authority, especially female leadership?" His jaw twitched. "I'm very adaptable," he replied. "I've worked with strong women before. I think leadership is about results, not gender." It sounded rehearsed, like something he thought I wanted to hear. I went through the rest of the interview with practiced ease. I asked about his resume gaps, how he handled conflict, his technical proficiencies. Each question was like turning a key deeper into the lock that held our shared past. And he kept answering like it wasn't eating him alive. When it ended, I stood to shake his hand. He took it, grip firm, but sweaty. He started to say something, but I cut him off with a polite smile. "We'll be in touch." He walked out with shoulders just slightly hunched. The same man who once told me I'd never make it in tech, now trying to convince me he was a team player. As the door shut behind him, I leaned back in my chair, heart racing, not from nerves, but from adrenaline. I should have felt triumphant, but instead I felt unsettled. I replayed the scene in my mind for hours that night. Not just the interview, but the years before it. How many times had I explained my vision to him while he scrolled Instagram? How often had I buried my instincts to protect his ego? And now, why here? Why my company? Was this fate? Karma? Or something more calculated? I pulled up his resume again and examined it closely. It looked normal, maybe too normal. Standard language, buzzwords, a job title at a mid-sized firm I'd heard of. But something gnawed at me. I opened LinkedIn and typed in his name. His profile was there, mostly aligned with what he'd submitted, but one thing stood out. His last job had ended 6 months ago. He claimed it was due to restructuring, but a quick search brought up a different story. A tweet. Buried under a thread about toxic managers was a reply from someone mentioning Derek's name, accusing him of sabotaging a project after being passed over for promotion. I dug further. Found a few vague Glassdoor reviews that hinted at internal politics and a vindictive male team lead. It wasn't hard to read between the lines. I forwarded the findings to my co-founder with a short note. Red flag. She replied in less than a minute. Big one. Don't touch him. But the suspicion didn't stop there. The next morning, I arrived at the office early. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Why would he apply here of all places? Surely he knew it was my company. My face was on the About Us page. I'd spoken on a few podcasts. He wasn't oblivious. He was opportunistic. That's when it hit me. He wasn't looking for any job. He was looking for me. But why? Revenge? Regret? Sabotage? Or something even colder, survival? People like Derek don't show up by accident. They show up when they smell an opportunity, or when their back is against the wall. I ran a quick internal system check. Nothing had been tampered with. No odd logins. No security flags. Still, I called our CTO and requested a quiet audit of system access points. Just in case. By noon, I received another ping, this time from our mutual friend, Karen. Karen, Hey, random Q. Did Derek just interview with you? He mentioned it on a call last night, but he said it was just a joke. A joke? I responded carefully. He did interview. Why? Did he say something specific? She replied almost instantly. Karen, just that it would be funny if he ended up working under you. He said he'd teach you how real business is run, lol. Honestly, I thought he was drunk. My hands clenched into fists. So that was it. He didn't want a job. He wanted to prove he still had power over me. That even after laughing at my dreams, walking away, and watching me rise, he could still insert himself into my life and win. But he didn't know what kind of person I'd become since the last time we sat across from each other. The woman who once sought his validation had been replaced by someone who built her own empire, code by code, breath by breath. I closed my laptop and stared out the window. Let him try. He was about to learn what happens when you try to mess with a woman who built herself from your mockery. 3 days passed. The buzz from the encounter with Derek hadn't faded. It had only deepened, thickened into something I could feel under my skin. But I hadn't heard back from him. Not directly. No emails. No thank you note. Just silence. That told me everything. He wasn't waiting to hear from us. He was waiting to make his next move. I decided to stay one step ahead. I called in Jules, our head of HR. She was sharp, intuitive, and fiercely protective of our company's values. I laid it all out. His past with me, the interview, the strange inconsistencies on his resume, and Karen's disturbing text. Jules leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, expression unreadable. You think he's targeting you? She asked. I think he's targeting us, I said. He came in under false pretenses, maybe hoping I'd flinch, maybe hoping he could leverage this somehow. She nodded slowly. You want to blacklist him? I hesitated. No, not yet. I want to find out what he's really after. That same afternoon, our CTO sent over a full report from the internal systems audit. Nothing had been accessed. No breaches. But he found something interesting in the logs. Someone had visited our website's admin login portal from a flagged IP address 3 days before Derek applied. The IP belonged to a co-working space in the same city where Derek last worked. Coincidence? Not likely. I spent that night poring through everything I could find: old emails, archived texts, social media posts. Anything that could tell me what Derek had been up to since our breakup. He'd scrubbed most of his online presence clean, but the traces that remained told a story of a man spiraling, laid off, bouncing between gigs, posting performative positivity on LinkedIn that reeked of desperation. And I wasn't the only woman he'd underestimated. There were hints in the comments, cryptic replies from ex-colleagues, passive-aggressive emojis from former coworkers. One thread caught my attention. A woman had posted about reclaiming her dignity after trusting the wrong mentor. No names, but a scroll through the likes and replies showed Derek's profile in the mix. He wasn't just arrogant. He was toxic. And now he was trying to wedge himself back into my world. But the turning point came the next morning. I was in the middle of a product meeting when my phone buzzed with a notification from our company's LinkedIn page. Someone had left a comment on one of our posts, a post I had authored about empowering women in leadership. The comment read, "Pretty words from someone who needed me to pass their first coding test. LOL. No name attached. Just an anonymous account with no profile picture. But I knew that voice. Derek." The comment was deleted within an hour, but not before I took a screenshot and sent it to Jules. "This is harassment now," she said immediately. "We can file a report." I agreed. But I also felt something shift deep inside me. A steel spine I hadn't realized was already forming. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about respect. About reclaiming my own narrative. I sat down that night and wrote a post of my own. Not to call him out directly, no names, no finger-pointing. Just the truth. Years ago, someone told me I'd never make it. They laughed at my ambition, doubted my skills, and said I didn't have what it takes to lead. Last week, that same person applied to my company, unaware I was the founder and CEO. Life has a funny way of circling back. Let this be a reminder to every woman who's ever been dismissed. Keep building. One day, They'll need you. I hit publish and let it breathe. Within hours, the post went viral. Hundreds of comments, thousands of shares, messages from women across the globe, thanking me for the reminder that growth is the best form of justice. Some even guessed what had happened. A few mutual friends probably pieced it together. But I didn't care. I didn't need the world to know his name. I just needed me to remember mine. 2 days later, I received an email from Derek. Subject: Congrats, I guess. Message: Saw your little post. Not sure what game you're playing, but I'm not surprised you'd use me for clout. Hope the attention helps you sleep better at night. No greeting. No signature. Just pure bitterness in digital form. I stared at the screen, smiling softly. He thought he was the sun around which everything orbited. But I had become my own solar system. I didn't reply. I archived the email, then flagged his resume in our internal system with a note: Do not interview again. Inappropriate behavior toward leadership. Then I stood, walked to the mirror in my office, and looked myself square in the eyes. I wasn't the same girl he walked out on. I wasn't the naive dreamer chasing approval. I was a leader, a builder, a survivor. And Derek? He was just another footnote in the story I was still writing. The Monday after that email, I walked into the office with my head held high and a plan forming in my mind. Derek's weak attempt to rattle me had the opposite effect. It made things clearer. His bitterness wasn't just about rejection. It was about irrelevance. And I had made him irrelevant by rising. Jules met me outside the boardroom with a folder in her hand. Thought you'd want to see this before your one-on-one with the team, she said. Inside the folder was a background report, not illegal, just publicly sourced intel we pulled from databases we had access to for hiring compliance. But this wasn't about hiring anymore. It was about pattern recognition. There was in black and white. Small Blue Diamond, 3 previous employers listed. Small Blue Diamond, 2 of them ended in what HR described as internal conflicts. Small Blue Diamond, 1 had notes from a reference. Not recommended for rehire due to inappropriate comments toward female coworkers. And the kicker? His last position hadn't ended because he outgrew it, as he claimed in his interview. It ended because the company shut down due to a massive data breach. While nothing legally pinned it on Derek, he was on the internal team being investigated when the plug was pulled. I closed the folder and exhaled. There it was, the truth. This man hadn't come into my world just looking for a job. He came hoping to infiltrate, maybe even sabotage. Maybe not out of a master plan, but out of spite, out of that insecure little itch some men feel when they see a woman build what they couldn't. I called a private meeting with my executive leadership team. Not because I wanted to gossip, but because it was time for transparency. Many of you may have noticed the recent spike in engagement on our LinkedIn page. I began. And some of you may have even guessed the story behind that post I made last week. A few exchanged glances. I smiled. I'll spare you the long version. But someone from my past, someone who once dismissed me, mocked me, told me I'd never amount to anything, recently applied for a position here. And when he realized who I had become, he tried to lash out. Online. Anonymously. Pathetically. Silence. Respectful, quiet, and full of understanding. This isn't about one man, I continued. This is about how often we, especially women, especially those of us who dare to lead, are told we're not enough. That we're imposters in the very spaces we've built. I paused, scanning their faces. Well, I'm here to tell you that we are more than enough. And if anyone tries to shake our foundation again, they'll find it's made of stone. Applause broke out, not loud and performative, but firm, rooted. The kind that fills a room without needing to roar. Later that evening, as the office quieted down and golden light spilled across the windows, I opened my laptop to review some final notes for our next project. But a new notification pulled my attention, an email from someone I didn't recognize. Subject: You don't know me, but I know him. Message: I saw your post last week. I wasn't sure if I should say anything, but I think we're talking about the same person. Derek worked at my company too. He was my manager for 3 months before I filed a formal complaint. He made my life miserable, gaslighting, minimizing my work, even taking credit for things I built. HR swept it under the rug. I quit. But reading your post? It gave me peace. It reminded me I wasn't crazy. So thank you for standing up, for surviving, for leading. I stared at the message, heart thudding. It had all come full circle. What I thought was just my pain was part of a pattern. What I thought was my private revenge had become someone else's redemption. My truth had given another woman a reason to believe in herself again. And in that moment, I realized something profound. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every woman who had ever sat across from a Derek in a boardroom or on a date. Every girl who was told to smile more, sit still, and not dream so big. Every person who'd ever been silenced, dismissed, or erased, only to rise louder, prouder, and unapologetically whole. Derek's regret wasn't just that I had become successful. His regret was that he no longer had the power to define me. And that was liberation. I closed the email, locked my laptop, and stepped out into the city night, letting the breeze wrap around me like armor. I wasn't just the CEO now. I was the evidence. Evidence that you can be told you're not good enough and still become extraordinary. That the people who try to write your ending don't get the final word. Only you do. The next morning felt different. I wasn't just stepping into the office as a founder anymore. I felt like something had shifted, like I had fully embodied the power I used to only pretend I had. The kind of power that's quiet but undeniable. The kind that doesn't need validation to exist. But as I crossed the lobby, my assistant caught up to me, her face pale. "There's something you need to see," she said quietly. She handed me her phone. A video was playing. It was Derek, sitting in his car, shaky hands gripping the steering wheel, his eyes bloodshot. "Everyone's praising her like she's a saint," he said bitterly to the camera. "Like she built all this on her own. But nobody ever asks what she did to me. What I lost. What it felt like to watch her become everything I wanted and know that she didn't even care." He laughed bitterly. "I made one mistake years ago, and suddenly I'm the villain. You want to know the truth? She used me. She was nothing when we dated, just a broke girl with big ideas and no plan. I helped her dream, and she threw me away." The video cut off mid-rant. A deep silence filled me. Not the kind that calms you. The kind that tightens around her lungs and makes everything feel suspended. Derek had posted this online. Publicly. The comment section was already dividing like wildfire. Some called him pathetic. Others called me manipulative. A few claimed I'd built my success on female victimhood. It was a mess, and it was growing. I walked into my office, shut the door behind me, and stood there, staring at the city skyline. This wasn't just about some bitter ex anymore. This was a narrative war. And I had a choice. Do I respond? Defend myself? Feed the fire? Or do I stay silent and let my truth continue to speak through the life I've built? For a long moment, I stood in the center of the room, eyes closed, remembering the nights I cried myself to sleep after Derek laughed at my business plan, the time he dismissed my pitch deck as a PowerPoint fantasy, the way he always looked at me like I was a cute distraction from real ambition. I remembered how much it hurt, how small he made me feel. But I also remembered the moment I launched my company. The first investor who said yes. The first office space. The first paycheck I signed. The day I stood on a TEDx stage and told a room full of strangers that you don't need to be believed in to believe in yourself. That was the truth. And no viral rant could rewrite that. Still, the situation demanded more than silence. So I opened my laptop and wrote. To those watching a storm unfold, let me be clear. I did not build my success out of revenge. I built it out of necessity, survival, and belief in myself when no one else would. The story I shared was never meant to shame, but to empower. And if you've ever been made to feel small, I hope you remember this. They don't get to decide your worth. You do. I hit post and logged off. That night, I got a call from one of our board members. "I just wanted to say," she said, "what you did? That was power. That was poise. And no matter what people say online, Every woman in this industry just stood a little taller because of you. My throat tightened. I hadn't cried throughout this whole ordeal, but now, with her voice steady and kind on the other end, the dam cracked. "Thank you," I whispered. After the call, I sat in the dark, staring out the window, letting the city lights blur behind my tears. This wasn't the ending I expected, but maybe that was the point. Life doesn't tie itself in neat little bows. People don't always get what they deserve when they deserve it. But sometimes, just sometimes, the truth wins anyway. The next week, Derek resigned. Quietly. No goodbyes. No final word. Just gone. A week after that, I received a small envelope on my desk. No name. No stamp. Just a card that said, "I see you now. I really do. I'm sorry I couldn't before. D." I read it twice. Then I set it in my drawer without another thought. Because I didn't need his apology. I didn't need closure. I had something better. I had freedom. Freedom from needing to prove anything. Freedom from seeking validation from someone who never saw my light until it blinded him. Freedom from the idea that my value was ever up for negotiation. Derek once laughed at my dream. Now he was just a shadow in my story. But me? I was still rising. And the best part? I hadn't even peaked yet. It's been 2 years since that storm passed. Funny how time has a way of polishing the jagged edges of old pain, turning it into something you can touch without flinching. Sometimes I reread that letter Derek left me, not to forgive him again, but to remind myself of how far I've come. He's moved on from what I hear. Working for another firm now, quieter, humbler. Maybe he's changed. Maybe not. But the truth is I no longer care. Because my life isn't about him. It never was. My company, once a wild, desperate dream, is now thriving. We've expanded across 3 continents. We empower underrepresented entrepreneurs. We mentor young women who were once told they weren't cut out for leadership. And every day, I walk into that office knowing that my existence is living proof that they were wrong. And I was right. Not because I got lucky. Not because someone handed me a silver platter. But because I refused to let someone else's doubt define my destiny. One afternoon, after speaking at an international summit, a teenage girl came up to me with tears in her eyes. "I used to think I wasn't smart enough," she whispered. "But after hearing your story, I want to start my own business. I just needed to see someone like me do it first." That moment cracked something open in me. Because that's what this was always about. Not revenge. Not validation. Not even success. Impact. If even one person stands a little taller because I didn't give up, then it was all worth it. Now, when I think about the nights I cried alone, the moments I questioned myself, the humiliation I swallowed just to survive, I don't feel broken. I feel proud. Because I turned every piece of that pain into fuel. And I built something sacred with it. People will always underestimate you, misunderstand you, misjudge you. Let them. Their opinion is not your reflection. Their disbelief is not your barrier. Their laughter is not your limit. You were born to rise. You were born to rebuild yourself from the ashes of their doubt. So if you're ever standing where I once stood, heartbroken, humiliated, abandoned, remember this. The story isn't over yet. And one day, they'll see your name at the top of the building, never realizing they once tried to tear you down before you even had the chance to climb. And when that day comes, smile. Because success isn't just the best revenge. It's your destiny.